So it's important to remember that in determining sexual harassment, we need to differentiate between intention and perception. What matters in cases of sexual harassment is the perception of the recipient. So even though a person intends to be funny, for example, making sexual jokes, or even if the person intends for something to be a compliment, for example, making sexual remarks, if the recipient finds the joke or the compliment to be offensive, to be hurtful, to be humiliating, we can consider these jokes and these compliments as sexual harassment. So again, in cases of sexual harassment, what matters is the experience of the recipient, the perception of the recipient, and not the intent of the perpetrator. Moving on, let's discuss visual and online sexual harassment. And here I have an example of an actual group chat of a group of boys who belong to a certain fraternity. And in this particular group chat, these boys were sharing the nude pictures of their exes. And they were not only sharing the nude pictures of their exes, but pinagpapiestahan nila yung nude pictures ng exes nila. And this is an example of visual and online sexual harassment. Our earlier examples also can be counted as online sexual harassment. But in this case, we see how these boys uploaded the nude pictures of their exes without any of the consent of these women. So these women entrusted these photos to their then boyfriends, believing that their boyfriends will protect them. But once they broke up, all hell broke loose. And so it's important for us to remember also that if there's anything that we don't want online, we shouldn't put that online because it's easy for our accounts to be compromised. We can lose our phones. Our accounts can get hacked. People can betray our trust. Other examples of online sexual harassment can be downloading pornographic material on someone else's phone or computer, sending unsolicited sexual photos, providing or presenting sexually inappropriate cartoons or drawings, and making lewd gestures or facial expressions. And finally, we have physical sexual harassment. And in this particular example, I have Senator Robin Padilla, who sparked conversation about marital rape and consent amongst married couples. The implicit message of Robin Padilla is that men have the right to have sex with their wives, regardless of whether their wives want to have sex with them. The message that he wants to come across, or the message that uh, he is sending out to the world and to Filipinos, is that men don't need the consent of their wives to have sexual relations with them. RA 11313. And the anti-rape law recognizes it as sexual assault. So any physical act, whether forced kissing, uh, unwanted touching, groping, sexual assault, are examples of physical sexual harassment. So now let's move on to the UP Anti-Sexual Harassment Code. And this is the declaration of policy, the UP Ash Code, which we already discussed earlier. Now, the UP Ash Code was instituted by the BOR in 2017, and it is the code that we follow up till this day. And the UP Ash Code applies to all members of the UP community and refers to the UP community refers to the teaching personnel, non-teaching personnel, students, other UP workers, and UP organizations. So teaching personnel include, of course, our teaching staff, regardless of rank, status appointment, teaching responsibilities. Non-teaching personnel include our admin staff, our reps, also regardless of their appointment. For students, it covers any person admitted to the university and who did not separate from the university formally, either through transfer, graduation, honorable dismissal, or expulsion. So all students whether on leave of absence or AWOL, are covered by the UP Ash Code. Other UP workers refer to non-UP contractual and job order workers who are under a contractual teaching and non-teaching arrangement with the university. And of course, UP organizations refer to organizations or groups registered and recognized by the university. So the UP Ash Code covers sexual harassment that's committed inside the UP premises and outside UP premises in a work, education, research, extension, or related activity. So basically, if you're outside UP and you're an official UP business, it is still covered, and sexual harassment happens, it is still covered by the UP Ash Code. Now, who are the people who are liable for sexual harassment? First, any person who directly participates in the execution of sexual harassment is liable. Anyone who induces or directs another to commit sexual harassment. Anyone who cooperates in sexual harassment, and without their cooperation, the sexual act wouldn't have happened. Anyone who cooperates in the commission of sexual harassment by another through previous or simultaneous act. A person can also be liable if they benefit from the commission of the act of sexual harassment, and if they conceal or hide the commission of any act of sexual harassment, if they actively cover up the act of sexual harassment. And finally, anyone who restrains or coerces the victim from filing the appropriate complaint. Now, the UP Ash Code classifies sexual harassment acts as light, less grave, and grave offenses. The following are the light offenses. So surreptitious looking, malicious leering or ogling, sexual jokes, smutty remarks, and so on and so forth. And the following are the penalties for students and for teaching and non-teaching personnel. Next, we have less grave offenses. And the following are less grave offenses according to the UP Ash Code. So touching, pinching, derogatory remarks, sexual advances, and so on. And the following are the penalties. And finally, here are the grave offenses as articulated in the UP Ash Code. So forced kissing, requesting for sexual favors in exchange for employment, promotion, grants, grades, etc. Attempting or consummating unwanted sexual intercourse, torture, and so on. And the penalties for teaching and non-teaching personnel is dismissal for students, it's suspension for a year, or dismissal or expulsion. Now, what should we do if we are harassed or if we know someone who experienced sexual harassment? So any sexual harassment should be reported orally or in writing to the OASH by the aggrieved party, or if the aggrieved party cannot write, a person, an authorized person, can file a complaint for the aggrieved party, provided that the aggrieved party is unable to file the complaint for themselves. This report should be in writing, signed by the aggrieved party or person, and notarized. So let's say if it was reported orally, it's going to be reduced in writing by a representative from the Office of Anti-Sexual Harassment. Now, once the report is filed to the OASH will schedule an interview with the complainant to gather more information about the complaint. Afterwards, the OASH will transcribe the interview and have these interviews signed by the complainant. And afterwards, the complainant may choose to pursue any of the following: a formal procedure, an informal procedure, a criminal complaint, or counseling. Now, if the complainant chooses to file a criminal complaint, they can still pursue a formal case within the university. The OASH will not force the complainant to file a case if they don't want to. Now let's discuss the informal procedures and the formal procedures within the university. So ano bang ibig sabihin nitong informal procedure? It refers to university actions other than formal procedures. So basically, informal procedures don't involve any administrative disciplinary proceedings in the university. And this can include your alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, like mediated conversation, written apology, corrective measures, and provision of support. However, both parties can only choose to engage in alternative dispute resolution if what happened, if the sexual harassment that happened is a first complaint in any of the CUs, the complaint is a light offense, and the complaint involves peer-to-peer. Otherwise, the OASH will not allow for the alternative dispute resolution to happen. Next, let's discuss what is involved in a formal procedure. So, formal procedures refer to an administrative disciplinary proceeding initiated upon a sworn written complaint and, after investigation, involves the issuance of a formal charge, the conduct of a summary hearing, resolution of a case, imposition of corrective measures, if any. Basically, a formal procedure is when a complainant decides to pursue an administrative case against the respondent or against the perpetrator. So what happens? Let's say complainant makes a report to the OASH. The OASH interviews the complainant, asks the complainant what they want to happen. Complainant says, I want to pursue a formal case. So if the complainant decides to pursue a formal case, a preliminary investigation will commence through the Anti-Sexual Harassment Council or to be conducted by the Anti-Sexual Harassment Council. So in this preliminary investigation, the ASH Council will decide whether there's a prima facie case of sexual harassment. Basically, at face value, can we say that sexual harassment indeed happened in this case? And if the ASH Council decides that there is a prima facie case of sexual harassment, they forward the report to the Office of the Chancellor, and the Office of the Chancellor will either pursue a formal investigation or dismiss the case. So if the Office of the Chancellor finds merit in the findings of the ASH Council, the Office of the Chancellor will issue a formal charge, and upon the issuance of a formal charge, the Chancellor will constitute a hearing committee of 3 members drawn from a hearing committee pool, and this hearing committee will be comprised of a chairperson, who is always a member of the teaching personnel, 1 member representing the sector of the complainant, and 1 member representing the sector of the respondent. So let's say we have a case filed by a student against a faculty member. So your hearing committee will have your chair, who's a faculty member, 1 representative from the teaching personnel, and 1 representative from the student. So once the hearing committee is constituted, they have 30 days to commence their investigation. And after they have concluded their investigation and forwarded the report to the Chancellor will render a decision. And that decision can be any penalty or any so that decision can involve penalty or any corrective measure as deemed necessary by the Chancellor. And the decision of the Chancellor is final and executory 10 days after the recipient receives the copy. And then it's also possible to automatically appeal the decision of the Chancellor to the President. And the President will decide on this appeal within 30 days of the receipt of the decision of the Chancellor. And no motion for reconsideration is allowed. Now, how do you report sexual harassment? We have several means to communicate with the Office of Anti-Sexual Harassment. You can contact us via email. You can go to our Facebook page and access our online sexual harassment report form. And you can reach out to us through our hotline. You can also scan this QR code to access our sexual harassment report form. Now, I would like to end with this reminder that when a community stands together to foster respect, hold each other accountable, and challenge harmful behaviors, it creates a culture where everyone feels safe and valued. Thank you for listening.